This is Festool's newest track saw offering, the TS60 KEB. Now, I've got to use this saw a very long time ago, and I've been using it exclusively pretty much on this project that I'm doing now, which I'll share a little bit in this video, but I'm going to tell you everything about it and share some of my thoughts. Spoiler alert, it might be the best one yet. Now, at first glance, this just looks very similar to the other track saws. So what's different about it? The very first thing that I want to get out of the way is addressing the elephant in the room. And this seems to be the one thing that I've gotten the most comments or questions about. And the one thing that I had the biggest question about when I first saw it. And that is, it does not have a plug-it cord. If we flip this around, you'll see that this is hardwired. So on the TS60, there is no removable power. Now, why would they do that, you ask? Well, it has to do with the new motor. This is the new EasyTech brushless motor. The power requirements here in the United States are higher for this, and therefore they exceed the standards for removable power. So what does that mean? It means if you want a more powerful motor, then you're going to have a cable. It's no different than, say, something like the OF 2200 or the HL 850 or any other large tool that has exceeded the power requirements for removable power that Festool offers. No different. Now we just have a more powerful track saw and a much better motor, and with that comes a cord that you can't unplug. So I wanted to highlight this topic right in the beginning of the video because it's the biggest point of contention, at least that I've gotten since owning the saw. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I haven't found it to be an issue at all. I literally just plug it into my vac and I make cuts. There's been no different. I just plug it in like I would anything else. For those of you that don't know, anytime you see letters and a number, so that number is associated with capacity on their tools. So for instance, TS60 means 60 millimeters depth of cut. However, this one's a little bit different because this will actually go to 62 millimeters of depth on a 90-degree cut, which is roughly 2 7/16. What about the capacity on a bevel cut? Well, at 45 degrees, we're going to get, guess what? 45 millimeters, which is 1 3/4 cut depth on a 45. So that's also a big benefit, seeing as how sometimes with that TS55, it was just barely out of reach to get those bevel cuts. And on this, that's now no longer going to be a problem. Since I was just showing you the bevel cut capacity, let's kind of talk about what the max capacities are. So I mentioned you can go to 45, so that's set at 45. If I wanted to cut that, I would just lock these knobs down, which these knobs I'll talk about, but I feel like they're easier to use. I don't know why, it's weird. But this little knob right here, I push that down, and then that will unlock and give me the ability to go to 47. So I can go 47, I can go 46. Now it locks back in place. Now I'm back on 45. I can go ahead and lock this down. So 47 degrees all the way to -1. Now right now it's on 0, but that's what this little lever right here is for. This is to go -1 degree. Say I was cutting up against a wall and I needed to put a little back bevel on something. If I slide this forward, it allows this to drop, and it allows it to drop via these pins. And it's not just one pin, it's 2 pins, and I'll show you the other one in just a moment. But what this allows is for me to simply lock that in place. I'm now at -1, and I can go ahead and lock down. To release it, just push it, let it come back up, and now these pins are resting. Now I said pins, let me show you the other one. What we have here is a adjustable pin here and an adjustable pin here, and it is now making contact with 2 separate points. There's a point of contact, there's a point of contact. Now, why is this valuable? Because it's just going to support the weight of the saw better. Now, the other thing that's great about these is these are how you can adjust and dial in perfect 90. In the event that it was ever to come out of whack, you would simply be able to adjust these, and that's going to give you that micro adjust to the left and right. A second ago, I was talking about the knobs. So the knobs are actually redesigned. They're not the same shape as the previous one, but for some reason, to me, these are a lot easier to adjust. And I think what it is not so much the knob itself, but on the other saws, there's a little plunge mechanism right here in the back. And I feel like it's just something that inhibits the knobs. So I've always found it, finicky to always to loosen the back one. With this, I don't get that. It's Very, very easy to adjust. The next thing I want to talk about has to do with dust extraction. And this saw has, you'll see some clips when I was working on this table that this saw is actually sitting on right now. It's what you would expect for dust collection on any Festool track saw. No big surprise there. However, something that's different is this port. So if I plug in my hose, this is just a 27 millimeter hose, what you'll see is that the hose is now directly diverted straight back. Now, if I spin this down, obviously it's down as well, right? But if I turn this, and it's a nice shallow angle, what will really illustrate this is what used to be on the track saws, or what's on the other track saws. And that is this one, where you can see very clearly that it's a much steeper angle. And while right here, that may not be the problem, it's when it goes like this. And now I can't even turn this thing down because the angle is so drastic. So while that's not a huge feature, it is a very, very nice addition and change to an already, great track saw. Now we have a port that is going to be a lot less likely to get snagged up on things. Okay, so let's talk about the blade and the riving knife. Or is it a riving knife? And the answer is no. This comes equipped with the redesigned kickback stop. The only other saw that has this from Festool is the TSC55 KEB. They have now incorporated it into the TS60 KEB. And as you can see, it is not in line with the blade because it is not a riving knife. For those that are not familiar with what the anti-kickback stop is, essentially this is in contact with your guide rail. And in the event that the saw wanted to lift up and this disengaged, it would shut the blade down immediately, therefore stopping any major issues or any sort of kickback or damage to your guide rail. So that's the purpose of the kickback stop. Now, the blade is just like all the other new saws in the fact that it is now the 1.8 millimeter kerf blade. Now, what does a thinner kerf blade mean for you? Thinner blade removes less material, increases the power, and then pair this blade with a new, more powerful motor, and you have a very powerful track saw. So I'm going to show you, honestly, one of my favorite features about this. This has the fast fix system, just like any other Festool track saw, for changing the blade, and it comes with an onboard Allen key here. So this just locks down, everything is stored in place. But you lift this up, turn it on its side, and go like this, and now I have easy access to the screw, which the way that this mounts is also different, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. But the thing that I really want to point out is look how it's sitting flat. This is one of my favorite features about this, because now changing out a blade is so easy because I am not trying to balance this like this while I'm trying to change a blade. It just sits flat. This is such a great improvement on this saw. Now, before I said that this was slightly different, as you can see, this is now geared. And what this does, so if I put my blade in there, right now it just kind of floats on top. But when I put this nut in here, it'll rest inside of those gears and it just lines everything up perfectly. Put your nut back in, tighten this down, and we're good to go. As you can see, the motor housing, since it's been completely redesigned, they were able to get it in line with the outside of the base. And as a result, you're able to set it down perfectly flat. This is a really, really great feature about this, the adjustment for the depth. So all the previous models, you kind of pushed in and slid up and down. Well, this one, you push these two together, and that's how you adjust it. And there's dual scales on here, so now we have both metric and imperial. I love how they put metric on the inside, so it's easier because, you should be using metric. And then here we have whatever the depth of our material is or the thickness of our material, and then this is how much the plunge depth is. This still does have the ability for micro adjust right here, but changing it out it's just as easy as the one before. On the motor housing here, you have the kickback stop button, which you can turn on or off, and it's indicated by this light when it's plugged in. So if you wanted to bypass it and not use the kickback stop feature, you absolutely can. And then like any of the other track saws, they are variable speed, and that knob is located over here on the side of the housing. And the last thing that I want to point out is that in my opinion, the base itself is a lot beefier on this saw than it is the previous saws. And where you can really see that is where these adjustments are to align it on the track and make sure you get that nice tight fit. The other one, none of this buildup right here is actually here. It's just flat. Now, what's nice is they put these little grooves in here so you can easily adjust and get it set on your track perfectly. Now, one more thing that I forgot is, this is a plunge saw. So on the saws, it has these markings. So you see here, that's going to be the back of the blade when it's at its full down position. Right here, this is the front of the blade, but it also has it here on the splinter guard. So this guard is actually going to live in the machine itself. So you have the inside splinter guard being the track, right, and the plastic strip that's on it. But if we wanted to add an outside splinter guard, we can simply by adding this here. So just like the other saws, you do have the ability to have outside splinter protection. And, that's one thing that makes the Festool saws so great is that they leave clean cuts not only on the inside, but also the outside. This track saw will also work with the FSK Rails, which is for the HKC or the HK track saw, which is their carpentry saw. This, you can kind of have the best of both worlds. And to put this on, it's extremely easy. We just line up the track, put it on there. I can use this in the same capacity that I could use the HK or the HKC. But this new TS60 now is the only other track saw that you can use on this other than the HK and the HKC. So I've had a lot of experience using this saw and being able to form my opinions. But I wanted to do something a little bit different with this specific video. And that was, I had an opportunity to put this thing to the test basically on a project that I'm currently working on. 2 large 7-foot by 5-foot conference tables that will eventually just make one large conference table. Now, the challenge that I put on myself was I am only going to use the track saw to not only straight line rip all of the 8-foot long boards, but I'm also going to use the track saw and the track to get my final width. The material that I'm using is 6/4 walnut. So I did not use a table saw. I did not use the miter saw. All I used was this track saw, the TS60, and I actually used the universal blade and didn't even use the ripping blade. And here's what I'm going to tell you based on that experiment. This performed fantastically. So much so that I am actually considering making that the way in which I go about a large panel glue up like this with really heavy material, instead of ever worrying about taking it to a table saw or ever worrying about managing it at a jointer. These tabletops came out flatter, straighter, tighter seams than probably any other tabletop that I've ever done. And all of that was just using a track saw. Now, does this track saw replace the other track saws? Is this the best track saw? If you want to know my opinions on that, you'll have to come back next week. Thanks.